Hello and welcome back, most illustrious members of the Detail. I'm your host D, also known as MTF Doom, and welcome to the first ever BrewsDay, where we're going to go over some home brews for you, the most illustrious. I hope you enjoy. Before we get into it, big thank yous and big shout outs to everyone who makes this possible. The thank you card is at the end if you'd like to be added to it. If you donate to any queer org this month, I don't have a Patreon yet. I've been requested to get one. It is in the works, but for this month, it's Pride Month. If you donate to any queer org, you will get your name in the credits. If you just provide anything for either the stream or the setup, you will be thanked in the credits. I appreciate everyone who watches and everyone who supports in whatever way they are capable of doing so. As little as a like or a subscribe, which costs you nothing but means a lot to me, can help. So this video came about actually yesterday's fight to the Doom opponent, Ludwig Frito. Longtime YouTube subscriber, longtime friend of the channel, Discord user, Ludwig, actually requested how neat would it be to have decks for early pool 3? Like, oh, you know, a deck list for if you open this card and it's your first pool 3 card. And I was like, funny enough, I actually have that video. And I went to link it, and I realized all those fucking decks are out of date. Like, there was like a leader deck. like, that deck sucks now. Like, The death wave doesn't work. I had not included. I think there's one deck that still worked, but ultimately enough cards have now entered pool 3 that can make a deck on their own, and enough have been changed such that those decks don't work. And I've realized that I've done so much content for people who are kind of in my position, like people who have followed me since the beginning, like in January. Well, all those people are basically pool 3 complete. Like, huge swaths of my Discord are like pool 3 complete. And that's like, that's cool. Like, you know, it's a different game once you're pool 3 complete. But like, if for the health of the game, content like this needs to get made so that new players don't just feel like, oh, fucking no one cares about me and my collection sucks. So I'm revisiting that idea. Every Tuesday, I'm going to do a BrewsDay, where if you sent me a brew, if it's just one that I want to work on, I'll play it. I'll do some gameplay highlights. We have 5 decks, so I'm not going to do gameplay highlights of these. But these are just ideas where if you just open a card as it's your first pool 3 card, these are the decks you could build with them. So we're going to go in order. My personal favorite... Oh, is going to be the Mysterio. So, Mysterio is the 2/4 that adds 2 zeros to the other lanes, the lanes that you don't play it in. Now, importantly, you need to remember which of the ones is real. The fakes have a slight green, like, aura around them on your side. Your opponent can't tell. They all look like 2 zeros to your opponent, but you'll be able to tell based on this green aura. The real one doesn't have it and the fakes do. But you just be very aware of where you're putting it. And at the end of the game, the real one will reveal itself. So what we're doing with this is we're doing a hybrid destroy and flood type deck. So the idea is Angela and Bishop are both really, really good with Mysterio. The reason being, Mysterio count, if you don't know this, like, I have covered this tech before, but so I apologize. If you're an entrenched player, you're going to know a lot of this, but I want this to be very approachable content. So Mysterio uniquely counts as 3 cards being played. Each of the clones count as a card. This is unlike things like Squirrel Girl, which count as 1 card being played even though 3 enter the battlefield. So Bishop gets +3 just when you play Mysterio, and the clone counts as a card being played here, quote unquote here, for Angela reasons. And so because of that, the 3 of these, and these are both free to play cards, Angela and Bishop. So the 3 of these sort of form this really great trifecta as a really solid base for a deck. It means that you generally don't want to play Mysterio on 2 almost ever. In general, if you can hold off and play him on 6, you're sort of best off because your opponent, it could be 5 or 6, but in this one we're going to talk about 6, and in a lot of the decks you're going to play it's going to be 6, but the point is you're going to get +3 on Bishop. Mysterio itself counts as 4, and then the clones, in some other lists you'll have other ways of taking advantage of these clones. The way we're taking advantage of them is via Carnage and Deathlock. We're just going to try to destroy the clones. Barring that, we're going to just try to destroy Nova so that the clones get +1. The clones will then be 2 1s, and the main one will be a 2/5 at the end of the game. We've got the Bucky Barnes. Again, if we're running stuff to clear out those 0 power clones, Bucky Barnes is a good include. Very few people are running armor right now, so Bucky Barnes is a very safe 2/6. Additionally, he is a 2/6, which is a vanilla. If you blow up Bucky Barnes and you make the Winter Soldier, things like Washington DC will buff him. Just keep that in mind. DC will also buff Mysterio clones at the end of the game, so keep all that in mind. Other than that, we're just rounding it out with another card that goes really good with Angela is right here, Nightcrawler. You play it into the Angela lane, then you move it, and you can play another card into Angela's lane. The newly buffed Medusa, while there is some restriction to that being the middle location, it's not such a huge restriction, and the fact that you can play her as a 2/5 on turn 6 and surprise your opponent with like Medusa, Bucky, Carnage, and have like, you know, a 2/5 in the center, and then a 2/6 and a 2/4 in a different lane, and like give your Bishop +3 on turn 6 is just like a lot of power that, especially early on in Pool 3, people are not expecting a lot of the time. And then you've got your generically good stuff, the Scarlet Witch, the Sentinel, and for consistency's sake, Chavez. There are a lot of these cards that we just do not want on turn 6, and if we play most of our hand out before 6, which in this variant of this deck, it is fine playing out like a bunch of cards on 3, 4, 5. In a different variant we're going to go into, you'll want to actually hold until 6. So if you find yourself down to like 1 card on 6, it would be really bad to draw any of these except for Chavez. So it's like, okay, cool. You're down to like 1 card, you know, maybe 2 cards. It's like a Sentinel. You just don't care. Like, you're not going to play out a Sentinel on 6. So you have your consistency in that. Chavez is like better than anything else as a single play. We also are going to cover some upgrades. So these are the big 4 in this deck. I might also include Bast, but that changes the dynamic a little bit. Basically, if you get like Hitmonkey, Kitty Pryde, and Hood, then Bast is included. And if not, if you're sort of still playing it the way that I outlined in the last deck, Bast isn't included. You don't want to Bast necessarily. Your Deathlock is like a bad enough hit that you don't want to do it. You'll never hit Chavez, so you don't have to worry. Yeah, maybe Bast is just included. The point is, these are cards that function really, really well with that deck. Hitmonkey, for the same reason that Bishop is good, Hitmonkey is good. Mysterio counts as 3 cards for Hitmonkey's on reveal effect. So Hitmonkey is just a 2/6. The only 2 cards you have Mysterio and it's turn 6 and you draw Hitmonkey, and those are the only 2 cards, you have a 2/4 and a 2/6. That's not that bad, especially if you also have Angela and Bishop out. But if you have another 2 cost, then Hitmonkey becomes a 2/8, and then you played a 2/4, and then you played just like whatever else. What 2 costs? You played a Sentinel. Like you got a 2/3, a 2/4, and a 2/8 on turn 6, and buffed your Bishop by 5 and your Angela by at least 2, maybe more. Just a really good card. Kitty Pryde, again, Kitty Pryde will trigger Angela every time you play her, as well as Bishop every time you play Angela every time you play Kitty Pryde into the same lane, and Bishop every time you play her no matter what. So it's just this compounding advantage of like, Kitty Pryde on her own as just 2 power each time you play her is not necessarily good enough. But with either of those, you get this compounding advantage of like, well, I was just going to float 1 energy, but now I'll take 3 power, 4 power in exchange for that 1 energy. Why not? And Hood, especially if we're playing the variant that I outlined in the previous slide, the Hood is a really good pickup because you end up being able to destroy this -3 and you get a 1/6. So again, like on turn 6, it's just another part of like a really robust game plan to get in and a bunch of power all at once that your opponent has a hard time like figuring out where you're going to deploy, and usually it's just bigger than whatever they're going to do. I highlighted this one first because this is just one of my favorite decks. If you end up opening Mysterio or you have some of these cards as I've outlined, like jump in the Discord and let me help you build a deck. This is like one of the most. And I miss Sarah. Sarah, again, especially if you're running a 2-cost heavy version like we were in the previous slide, Sarah just gets better and better because the more 2s you have in your hand going into turn 6, the more effective Sarah is. In general, she's kind of most effective if you have a clutch of 6 2-cost cards and you're playing out 12 energies worth of cards on turn 6. That's like, yeah, it's really hard for opponents to play around and to beat. And in general, they'll also have priority, so it's hard for them to even like Shang-Chi your stuff. And you don't rely that heavily on reveals. So even a Cosmo, it only really hits Hitmonkey if you're doing that variant. But ultimately, Sarah can absolutely break this deck in half. All right, moving on. Death. So if Death is the first card you open, Death is an 8/12. She recently got reduced from a 9/12, so she costs 1 less. Every card that gets destroyed reduces her cost by an additional 1. This used to work with I think I outlined this one as Death Wave at one. I mean, I've played Death Wave a bunch. This no longer works with Wave. So Death is just this 8 minus the number of destroys, and Wave will always set her to 4. There's no getting around it. All right. So what are we trying to do? I mean, we have a lot of the destroy stuff again. This time we are also playing Killmonger. We want all of our 1 costs to be destroyed. Nova, just for the +1s. Squirrel Girl plus the Squirrel tokens is just worth 3 destroys for 1 Killmonger. Yondu destroys something when he enters and then gets destroyed by Killmonger, and we're happy. Same Bucky Barnes. Again, like a 2/6 is just a really good stat line. We additionally have Mr. Sinister, and the reason for this is 1, you can Carnage and it's 2 bodies instead of 1. You can also Deathlock for the same reason. While Deathlock doesn't get any bigger by destroying 2 Mr. Sinisters instead of just 1, it does count as 2 discounts for death. But also, if we have Nova and we play Killmonger, Mr. Sinister becomes a 2/2, or becomes a 2/3 and a 2/3. So it becomes a 2/6 with the Nova play, and that's just good enough. Wolverine just becomes a 2/4 if you destroy him once, and again, like that's really where we want to be at. We don't yet have a lot of ways to destroy stuff, so we got to make the most of the 2 like explicit destroy this stuff and the 1 that is more conditional. We just have to make the most of those, and Wolverine is just one of those ways that we can gain a little bit extra value. This does count as being destroyed even though it regenerates for death reasons. There's an interesting thing. If you discard Apocalypse, it does not count as being discarded for Hela reasons. So just, if that ever comes up, just keep that in mind. You won't get an Apocalypse back with Hela if it regenerated into your hand. And then Sabretooth, when you destroy it, it returns as a 0 cost. And so it's just another way of like, you can hold it, you can destroy it twice if you get both Carnage and Deathlock out. But in general, you want to destroy it once and then hold it as a 0/4 to deploy wherever you need it on turn 6. And then it's some additions. The kind of obvious one for me is Venom. It's just another way to destroy cards. It got buffed to a 3/3, so it's like a very reasonable stat line. And it's just, it's the same this is kind of the hybrid between Deathlock and Carnage in a lot of ways, right? Like it's got the 3 energy cost. It grows like Carnage, but it costs more like Deathlock. And in general, it's not necessarily strictly better than either, because if you're playing the Hood, which should again be kind of your first pickup for a deck like this, Carnage and Deathlock are both better at eating the Hood, and Venom is worse at it. And then by the same token, so if you play Debrii, which adds rocks, so these are just 1/0s, they disrupt your opponent's game plan, but you can eat them with Carnage and Venom and Deathlock. So again, Carnage is better at eating rocks, Deathlock is neutral, and Venom is neutral, right? Because Venom doesn't get any bonus stats. So it's not like Venom is strictly better, even though he's a pool 3 card. He's just different, but there are times where he's better, and there are also plenty of times where he's actually kind of worse than either of the other 2 options, right? Like for 3 energy, you'd rather just have the Deathlock, the 5 power, if all you're doing is blowing up a rock. But in other ways, like eating a Deadpool for a 3rd time, you want all of them, and like a Venom that you play on, you know, turn 5 alongside a Deadpool that has died a couple of times is much better than a Carnage or a Deathlock. So there's give and take. Just keep that in mind. These would be the sort of big 4. Wave would be here, except that they changed it, and I don't know that there's much else that I really want from this deck. It's a very solid core, made just better as you get these cards. Really good deck. Honestly, very good in the not just Proving Grounds, in Conquest in general. I've been getting matched up into it quite a lot, and I feel like I've been really struggling to beat it with my kind of bounce decks. So I don't know what's going on, if it just puts out more stats than I'm like able to handle, but it's just a good deck. It's just a good deck. It can hold off on Prio and not get shanged, and it's just a good deck. Next up, we have a weird one. We have kind of a triple. So hear me out. Doom, Magneto, and Orca all fill kind of a similar set of circumstance. Basically, this could work. It works best with Doom, I think. I'm gonna say. But it's not the worst with either of the other ones, and we'll get into why that is. So, basically, if you open a big, splashy 6 cost, this might be the deck for you. Honestly, this could even be She-Hulk, for a reason we'll get into. So, it is this is what in a lot of games you might call a mid-range deck. It is just a bunch of reasonable threats that at all stages of the game are good. Like Iceman, you want to play on 1, but like if you play him on a different turn, that's fine. Like disrupting your opponent's game plan. How many times have you flipped up the location, the what is it, the freezer, the cooler, whatever, and it just Iceman's 1 card in each player's hand? You're like, well, okay, well my Sarah costs 6 now. Or the Dream Dimension where all your cards cost 1 extra on 5, and you're like, well, I can't Black Bolt on 5, so my stature is now useless. Like, you know, Iceman just has the opportunity to disrupt your opponent's very linear game plan in a way that makes it so that they cannot win a game. So, just good. Again, Medusa got buffed. I don't know if this is the best card here, but I'd like to give her some amount of play, especially, like, I played her a lot in Pool 2, and I think even when she was a 2-4, she was kind of good enough in Pool 2 for what I needed. I'd like to think the same is still true as a 2-5 in the early game. She's going to be a card you replace pretty quickly. Think of that if you open like a Polaris, any deck that has Medusa can have Polaris instead. It can be Lizard. I think Lizard's a little worse as a 2-5 that gets -4, but you're not locked to playing him in the center location. The other thing we have going for us is Storm. So if the center location is something like Death's Domain, something that would just turn off Medusa strictly, the ability to go Storm into Medusa plus Scorpion or something, or even just Medusa and Iceman on 4, turning the center location into flooding, and then following up with 5 power plus, you know, a little doodler is like pretty good. It's enough to win it some of the time, especially with what we have going on later in the deck. The other really classic one that you probably know about, if you're an entrenched enough player that you're looking at this video, you know about Storm into Jessica Jones, but just to make it absolutely clear, this is one of the best lockout plays you can make for quite a while into pool 3. Just going turn 3 Storm, turn 4 Jessica Jones. There's almost nothing your opponent can play to beat that. Like if they play a Cosmo to shut down the Jessica on reveal, well, they lost because Cosmo doesn't beat Jessica Jones's base power. If one of their early cards is something like, what is it? Like the Sentry, that ties it, right? That ties Storm plus Jessica Jones, but they still have to take care of the Void. It's just a really solid play with lots of stuff, doesn't beat it. Additionally, we have Mr. Fantastic if we find... Well, you always kind of want to play him mid, but, it's just a way to get more power into a flooded location that your opponent might not be aware of. We have Claw for the same reason. The ability to add 6 power. Your opponent might have pulled... you say you didn't have the Jessica Jones. Your opponent hard committed to flooding, and you're just behind. Claw. Hit him with the Claw. You got the Claw. We're here for you. We got White Queen as info. In general, the card draw doesn't matter, but if you haven't drawn any of your 6 costs and they have a better 6 than your Chavez, because you know you're guaranteed a Chavez on 6, you might play theirs. But ultimately, more of the time than not, you're playing White Queen to see what you're supposed to be playing around, and as a sort of reasonable 4 card, like a 4/6 stat line is just fine. It's just totally fine. Gamora is just way overstated if you can hit with her on reveal, and as you get used to this deck, it's not that hard, especially if you flood it on 3, because it's a 50-50, but it's usually better than a 50-50. Usually one of their locations, you're like, they're not gonna, in general, they're not gonna fill. They're like, if they have 3 cards in a location, they're usually not gonna commit a 4th card on turn 5. Oh, hang on, this is the wrong. There we go. Swap that one in. Usually they're not gonna fill on turn 5, so they're not gonna commit a card there. So like, they're gonna commit a card to the other lane, or they're not gonna commit one at all. At which point you're kind of happy with that too, and then you're gonna end it out with either Doom, Magneto, Orca. Orca's maybe the weaker of them, but the ability to just like spam out 2 lanes, just go real hard with like Iceman, Medusa, Storm into like 1 lane, and then like Jessica Jones Claw, and then it's like, okay, well, did they win flooding? Well, no. Okay, then you're just gonna win with Orca, because Orca plus Claw is bigger than anything they're gonna do. Well, like, did they win this lane, the Jessica Jones into Claw lane? Well, okay, then they didn't win flooding, or they're not gonna win the Orca lane. Like, you're putting so much pressure everywhere with the Orca play that you're like, it's really hard for your opponent to overcome it when you just curve out playing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And any of the good 6s, like I said, Doom, Magneto, Orca, all kind of work. Doom and Magneto are a little better, but Orca's not bad. I'm just calling this one the Big 6. Some additions to that would be Wave. Mostly because you want to go Wave on 3, and then one of those Big 6 on 4, and then something, Claw or Gamora on 5, and then another 6 cost on 6. And most decks, like, there's a lot of decks that don't even run multiple 6 costs, and if they do, one of them is Chavez, and so Wave can just give you the energy advantage. While she's only a 3/3 herself, in general, you're just playing bigger stuff off the back of her. And so, you know, just a good card in this deck. Like I said, Polaris is good in any deck that's running Medusa or just needs a mid-range threat. I think she's a little better in a deck like this with the ability to, like, change the math on the flooding or fill up a lane so that you can hit a Gamora. You know, thinking in those terms, Polaris can be better in this deck. But in general, she's a good stuff type card. She can go in a lot of decks. There's no deck that I would recommend. Like, if you open Polaris first, there's not like a deck that I can recommend, like, oh yeah, she just makes this deck, but she's a really good, like, I opened Polaris very early in pool 3 and I jammed her in basically every deck I played, and she's like always good. She's sort of criminally underutilized. Maximus used to be an absolute powerhouse of the format. He's a little worse now, and I don't really know. I think just there's more people trying to play a lot of stuff on turn 6. So I don't know if I even, like, necessarily agree with this, but especially if you tech in Cosmo, Maximus gets way better. But in general, a 3/7, again, if all you're doing is just trying to play stats every turn, while Maximus on 3 isn't ideal, you know, if it wins you a flooding and just locks that location out, it's not the worst thing you can do on 4. Like, it just isn't. Usually you'll do better, but, like, Maximus is a mainstay, or was a mainstay, for a reason, and I think can still have a place, again, especially if you tech in Cosmo as one of your tech cards. And then Captain Marvel, really good with flooding because you can commit her to the flooding location if you play flooding on 4. So okay, you play Storm on 4, Captain Marvel into flooding on 5, or vice versa. You play Storm on 3, play something on 4. Oh no, your opponent got ahead. Well, Captain Marvel will fly there at the end of the game if it means the difference between winning and losing. And so I like to say Captain Marvel kind of lets you make one mistake with where you commit your power. She herself is slightly underpowered. I know you could play Vision, but the fact that this happens at the end of the game and has some AI behind it that can actually mathematically figure out if it would win you the game, there's some value to that Vision can't have, because you still had to make even if you move Vision, you had to make the choice to move him, and you can make that choice wrong. The Captain Marvel, if she'll win you the game, she will win you the game. So and then, oh my god, we got 2 more still. Lucky you. All right, Destroyer is a 6/15. On reveal, destroy your other cards. There's a really good deck. It's just Spectrum Destroyer. Destroyer, historically and hilariously, there's a curse in our Discord. Destroyer is always your last pool 3 card. Just me and a couple other people open Destroyer as our last, like, literally my last pool 3, I think. And I think Shaz is, like, second to last or third to last, and I think Frog and a Tent as well. But ultimately, all you're trying to do, if you've played the ongoing Spectrum deck, it's kind of just that. You're just stacking one lane with, like, an Armor and a Fantastic or an America. You'll even play Namor into that lane, right? And then if you... Okay, so how this deck works is, if playing Spectrum would win you the game, you play Spectrum, right? If giving your, like, Warpath and then your Namor and then, like, your Ant-Man all +2 would, like, win you the game, then you just play Spectrum. But, like, if you have something you have a bunch of stuff under Armor, and then, like, you have a Cosmo in a different lane, and then, like, you have, like, a Namor somewhere else, you just go Destroyer into the Cosmo lane. It doesn't, the on reveal doesn't go off, and then you win because you just played a 6/15, and, like, that wins you the game sometimes. So it's just, like, ultimately, you're playing it so that your opponent kind of thinks they're playing against one thing, but they're playing against 2 things, and if tall wins, you play tall, and if wide wins, you play wide. And there's just a huge amount of value in being able to do that. And this deck, it suits really, because you're already playing the Armor and the Cosmo. this deck just suits it really, really well. There's not much to add to that deck. The only things you can kind of add, Zabu is just good because it lets you ramp out your Namor, your Warpath, whatever. But also it's just an ongoing. The other big thing is that you can't really play Enchantress. Like, you're going to hit a bunch of good ongoings on your side. So it's kind of doesn't matter if you hit one on theirs because, like, you lost your ongoings on maybe multiple cards. So something like Rogue is the out that you have if you want to play something to get rid of an ongoing from an opponent. In general, it's not really that important, at least right now, but if you need it, you need it. And then Super Scroll, kind of the same reason. If your opponent is doing ongoing stuff and so are you, Super Scroll wins you the mirror most of the time. It doesn't work as well with Darkhawk or Dino. I mean, you're not usually playing out your whole hand, so your dinos are big enough. Your copied dino effect. But the Darkhawk one is really tough because if they're playing a Darkhawk deck, they've put a lot of rocks into your deck, but you probably haven't put that many into theirs. So the Super Scroll's a little worse in that matchup, but ultimately, these are all tech cards. None of them are necessary. I think this is the Destroyer deck is the one that's like the most out of the box ready to play. So if you get Destroyer, like this is a really good deck. And then finally we've got Bast. Again, just one of my favorite decks, which is why I'm including it, if we're being totally honest. Bast itself is a 1/1. On reveal, set the power of all cards in your hand to 3. So by that logic, we just want to play cards that have less than 3 power, wouldn't you know? So Sunspot's good. Nightcrawler's a little less good, but we need something to get into hard to reach locations. Angela's exceptional. Forge is okay. It's a funny way of adding power because we can't play like Okoye and we can't play Nakia because, well, we could play them, but Bast would then override. We'd have to go in order, like Bast and then Nakia, and we wouldn't want to risk not doing that. So this is a way of getting like Forge can get +2 and then also pass another +2 along, so you can end up with like 5 instead of 3, or like 7 instead of 5 or 8 instead of 7, or whatever, you know, like depending on how many different effects hit. You know, Ironheart as a 3/3 that also gives +6 total power somewhere else, exceptionally good. Bishop, just really good as a 3/3 that gets +1 per card played. Wolfsbane, a 3/3 that gets +2 for each other card you have here, exceptional. Whoo! Iron Man as a 5/3 that doubles the total power. Oh, look out. Oh! And then White Tiger. And you're going to notice something. All these cards are also good with Mr. Negative. So, Bast and Negative, if you open them, the deck list is going to look really, really similar. And in fact, if you open Bast, Mr. Negative is a really good include because the cards are so similar. But I just want to bring attention to this one first and foremost because it would preclude you not playing Chavez. You definitely do not play Chavez. You do not play Nightcrawler. And you probably don't play Medusa. If you open Negative as well as Bast, just keep that in mind. Don't play those 3. Pick other things that have high energy and low power. It's not that hard to find other stuff. Like, you definitely have some stuff in your collection that just fits better, and I just wanted to make that clear. Okay. More stuff that works specifically well with Bast would be something like the Hood. You know, turning it into a 1/3 that also produces a 1/6 is incredible. Kitty Pryde, just starting her off as a 1/3 that gets +2 each play. In addition, you're playing Bishop and Angela, so Kitty Pryde forms a really good trifecta with the 3 of those. Deadpool would preclude you making some different choices with your deck building, but is really good to hit. I guess you could put Human Torch in this pool as well, but Deadpool is slightly better because it gets +2. Like, Human Torch getting +1 is good, but Deadpool getting +2 is really good. Like, it's just a bigger buff. it ultimately functions the same. Each time it doubles, it doubles. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, if they start at 3 and they double each time, they're going to get as big as each other if you move or destroy them the same number of times. This one just happens to be easier to do, I think. Hitmonkey, we already covered why Hitmonkey's really good. Starting him at 3 power is just better. Mysterio. While we did cover Mysterio the last time we talked about Hitmonkey, I want to make it clear that the Mysterio himself becomes a 2/3, but the clones also become 2/3s. And at the end of the game, they stay 2/3s. They do not become 2/0s. So Bast it takes Mysterio from 4 total power to 9 total power. So Mysterio becomes a 2/9 if it gets basted. Incredible. And then Darkhawk would also preclude some amount of deck changes. You'd want to play at least Korg and probably Falcon at least to kind of recycle your Korg. But ultimately, Darkhawk being a 4/3 that gets +2 for each card in your opponent's deck, I think the natural, quote-unquote natural end is to have 3 left in your deck. Is that right? There's 6 turns and you start with 3 in hand, so that's 9. So like Darkhawk's a 4/6. If you Bast, it's a 4/9. So like a 4/9 is already pretty good. With just a Korg, it's a 4/11, and a 4/11 is really good. So it, you know, there's some other changes that you would make if you had Bast Darkhawk, but you don't have to. Like, they're just good already. That's it. That's all 5 decks. We speed ran that. We got it done in under 40 minutes. I'm so glad. Thank you all so much for watching. Oh, actually, I'm going to flip to the outro. Give me a second. Thank you so much, everyone who watches, everyone who supports. Among them are the following. The Tiny Ruby, A Frog in a Tent, Clips, Crayon Eater, Cole D, Polyhaze, Satorius, Demisi, and KD. All of these people have donated either their time, their money, or both to a queer org this Pride Month, or to me, a queer organization myself. I appreciate so much. If you want to have your name added to this list, all you have to do is either send a monetary donation to any queer nonprofit, or volunteer your time at any Pride event and send me a picture on Discord of either your like receipt or of like a selfie of you, you know, marching at a Pride event, and you will have your name added to this list. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a great day, and I will see you all tomorrow.